Patrick Christie's here with Westmonster, and I'm with Brendan Chilton, who's General Secretary of Labour Leave and was a key voice in the Brexit movement. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Afternoon, Patrick. So I'm a bit wet.
No, it's all right. Pick the worst time possible to try and dodge across Westminster now.
Yeah.
So basically, in the last few moments, really, we've learnt that Labour is planning to put down a three-line whip to tell MPs to vote against EU withdrawal bill. I mean, what's your take on that?
Well, I mean, I think, firstly, I think it's important to acknowledge that, the Labour Party did officially campaign to remain in the European Union, and in the subsequent votes we've had in Parliament on Article 50, etc., there has been a significant contingent that have wanted to not invoke it. They want to stay. And I've got no quarrel with people that believe in a united federal Europe. But the country doesn't. The country voted to leave the European Union, and in the general election we just had, the Labour Party went in saying we're leaving the European Union, freedom of movement would end, and in various speeches and debates, Corbyn and other senior figures indicated that we would be leaving the single market and the customs union. And so now we are in a little bit of a peculiar situation where this week the government are bringing forward a bill to essentially transfer all the European Union laws into UK law, taking back control, and the Labour Party is putting a three-line whip down to vote against that. I know a number of Labour MPs are very concerned about this because their constituencies voted leave all through the summer. Senior Labour spokespersons have said, Barry Gardiner, for example, why we should leave the customs union. Sir Keir Starmer, a few months ago, indicated that we would be leaving the single market. And now we appear to be not so clear on our position. And I think a lot of voters, particularly Labour Leave voters, of which there are about 4 million in the country, will be very concerned by the development today.
Absolutely. And Keir Starmer and Tom Watson have kind of flip-flopped on this a little bit. So they said that now they would like us to stay in the single market and customs union for assuming the duration of this transitional period, which could be until 2022 potentially. I mean, is this the breaking of a manifesto promise? Is this a misleading the British people?
Well, I think, again, as I say, during our manifesto, which we had this year in the general election, it was a Brexit manifesto, and it deprived the Tories of a majority. In key seats, we won across the country 1 million UKIP voters. We won back Labour voters that felt they were no longer able to vote for the Labour Party because we were clear. We dealt with the issue. I think it was page 1 of the manifesto as the key pledge, how to negotiate Brexit. And we were very clear that freedom of movement would end. Now, if we're now saying that we're going to stay in the single market, freedom of movement can't end. So we need to choose between our most successful manifesto in many, many years or the European Union. I know what Labour voters want us to do. They want us to deliver our manifesto, which means ending freedom of movement. There are a whole range of other policies, such as nationalising railways, bringing back postal services into public ownership, ending privatisation in the NHS, which we cannot do, all the while we're part of the single market, because rules there prohibit that. And I know the Labour Party is very committed to elevating the poorest in the world out of poverty. If we stay in the customs union, we will not be able to strike our own free and fair trade deals that remove tariffs on good produced in the developing world, and we keep them in poverty. And so again, we've kind of got a choice between our own manifesto and our own ideals, very popular ones, or the European Union. And I hope in time where the party realises that we need to be on the side of the people in our manifesto and not Brussels.
And what does this constant flip-flopping do to the public impression of the Labour Party? I mean, it does kind of give a vibe of a bit of chaos. Maybe Jeremy Corbyn doesn't quite know where he stands. I mean, from your point of view, as someone who's kind of inside the party, I mean, are you worried about how this is looking? Are you worried about the 4 million people that now might turn against Corbyn, or what do you feel about it?
I certainly think this summer has not been our best on our EU policy. I mean, we have, as I say, I actually remember in the very early hours of referendum day, the day after rather, I woke up after about 20 minutes sleep, and on the telly there was Jeremy Corbyn saying that we need to invoke Article 50 now, and that we need to leave the single market and we need to leave the customs union. That policy then changed a little bit as we went along. Barry Gardiner said we ought to, he's our trade secretary, said we should leave the customs union. As I said earlier, Sir Keir Starmer was pro leaving the single market, and now we appear to be saying, well, let's stay in for a little bit longer, we'll vote against the repeal bill. And it does create in the public mind a sort of uncertainty and a sort of blurriness as to what our policy actually is. And I think rather than actually clarifying what Labour's policy is, all it has done is made it that little bit more confused. In terms of how this is going to relay in the country, well, I highlighted earlier on that we won around 1 million UKIP voters to the Labour Party, which made sure we held on to some of those seats in the Midlands where the Tories were really pretty close behind us. What they'll do now, I don't know. I mean, we need to wait and see. I would say, however, that in this election as well, we did have a lot of Remain people vote for the Labour Party, a lot of students in London and in other metropolitan areas. And so it is a bit difficult for the Labour Party, but fundamentally the British people voted in a referendum, Labour supported a referendum, and we should respect and honour the outcome.
Now, staying in the single market obviously would necessarily mean free movement of people. The Labour Party is supposedly the party of the working class, of the workers, and isn't free movement of people quite a negative thing for the working class in Britain, really? I mean, because it kind of fills up the labour market. I mean, what are your opinions on that? Should the Labour Party really, as a party of the working class, not have been quite adamant about leaving the EU and free movement of people anyway?
Well, I mean, if you look at all the polls and research are done, it is those lower income voters, those people that, as you say, just working class people always supported the Labour Party. They are the ones who are most strongly opposed to freedom of movement. And I think, again, this is a very difficult one, because what you essentially have now within the European Union, it's not just freedom of movement. You have freedom of movement for anyone within the European Union. So that means people from outside who come in also add that extra burden, as you say, to the employment market, compression on wages and all these other points that are well known. I think, again, the difficulty the Labour Party's got here as well is it is an internationalist party by its history. The trade union movement is an international movement. There's a strong sense that we need to be welcoming to people. But there's a difference between being welcoming to people and embracing people, which I think everybody's in favour of, and then having sensible controls on migration. Free movement is an unregulated market, and the Labour Party is for regulation. We believe in restricting the market and controlling and intervening to ensure people aren't exploited and they're not devalued in any sense. But again, there's been a campaign launched called Labour for Free Movement. And this is a group that's been set up by some trade unions and some people within the parliamentary party. And it just amazes me how people, certainly on the left, as I am, could argue for a system that is set up for people to be able to be moved freely as companies wish. They're no longer individuals, they're just commodities of a market. Yeah. And for me, someone who I'm working class, I'm a trade unionist, I'm a Labour man, I don't want to be a commodity of a market, I'm a person. And I want the Labour Party to treat me as a person and not something that's just there to be used for a single market that exploits free movement of people. And so, I think working class people are not very happy with this. And again, the Labour Party was very clear in our manifesto. We are going to end free movement when we leave the European Union. That was a very clear pledge, and people will be looking to us to honour that pledge. Yeah,
I mean, there's another potential hypocrisy there with regards to the manifesto promises as well. When you look at what was said about the education system, especially in higher education. I mean, Nick Clegg was vilified and hung, drawn and quartered for backtracking. Yeah, exactly. How do you feel about what's gone on since with Corbyn saying it was more of an aspiration to end tuition fees and things like that? I mean, was that not great with you slightly as well?
Well, I mean, I marched against Nick Clegg and the coalition. I wasn't involved in any of the disreputable activities that took place, namely the riots. Yes. But I was on the marches, and I remember there was a very strong feeling in the student population then that they had been totally betrayed. The Lib Dems made a clear policy. They got into government and completely reversed it. Now, I think, again, it is certainly, I want to see the Labour Party abolish tuition fees. I don't see why our generation should be paying for something that the generation that went before us had as a right. Have we become so demolished as a country and so weak as a country that we can no longer afford to educate our own people? That just seems to be an absolute lunacy. Now, in terms of what the Labour Party said, it is unfortunate that there has been this sort of mix-up in policy. I do think the Labour Party needs to come up with a way that this can be funded and that needs to be delivered, because, again, a lot of those young people that turned to Labour, I mean, Canterbury, the seat next door to where I live in Ashford, came to Labour. because partly there's a very large student population that supported tuition fees going, and so they came to us. What's going to happen to that seat if we don't honour that pledge? I wouldn't like to think. But again, unfortunately this summer it hasn't been our finest on a number of policy areas, and we need clarity as soon as possible.
Just lastly, and it's a double-barrelled question this, if you'll forgive me, but there are obviously, returning to Brexit, there's obviously big rumours that Corbyn may not have voted to remain. Firstly, have you heard anything about that? And secondly, given the two kind of broken promises we've spoken about, can Corbyn actually be trusted to run the country?
I don't know how Corbyn voted, but I am a betting man, and I would bet that Corbyn probably voted to leave. Every single vote in the House of Commons on any issue relating to further integration into the European Union throughout his whole career, he voted against. That's on record. I think Corbyn is a very decent man, actually. I think he truly believes in having a better world. I think he does believe in building a society where people's wages go up, where public services are available to people. Because when you look at the way the country is today, I mean, you've got people of our generation all sitting here. They're up for the benefit of the camera. There are other people sitting here. Can't afford to buy or rent a house. They can't afford tuition. Healthcare costs are going up. Their grandparents are having to sell their house to get care. Now, we're meant to be the 4th or 5th richest country in the world. We can't educate our children, care for the elderly and have decent public services. We've got something wrong with us. And so I think Corbyn does genuinely want to change all that. I just think what he needs to do is stick to his principles. I think a lot of the people listen to what he says and agree with what he says. He just needs to not be distracted by those around him. He needs to stay firm to what he believes in, and I'm sure when the next general election comes, we'll have a Labour government.
Thank you very much for joining us. You take care. I hope to see you again soon.